Dave, you can co-host me. I do have a couple pictures here to prove that I've earned my seat in OA. But anyways, I'm Bob Lindsay. I'm a compulsive overeater. My story is a phased war, shall we say. I fought with food for my first 47 years. And I started making gradual improvement from at the age of 47. I was already in the fellowship for 2.5 years. I was still fighting with the food. I'll start at the beginning. For my first 18 years, I've abused food as long as I can remember. I didn't identify it as being a problem. When I grew up, I snuck my parents. They were not wealthy, particularly. My mother would cook, she'd cook enough for the 5 of us to have, maybe 2 or 3 meals, and I'd sneak home from school. I never connected the fact that I was very lonely and disconnected in my school life and everything, and I never connected the dots that maybe if I stayed around after school and engaged in activities and sports and stuff like that, instead of running right home and raiding the refrigerator, that maybe I'd have had a more social life. Maybe I'd have had more people in my life. I just never quite put this all together. And in fact, it was funny. One of the few people that signed my high school yearbook, he wrote in there, "Best wishes, Bob, and slow down with the eating." Now, if I learned anything from that statement was I had to start hiding it. And of course, we know what happens with this disease. This isn't a matter of sleeping off a bad binge. It accumulates on you and it starts to show. And but I'm a male. Men don't talk to other men about their weight. That's a woman thing that women talk to each other. That's maybe why they live about 2.5 years longer than we do. I don't know on average, but so no one was saying anything about it. But I perceived, as I have in just about every walk of life, that you were judging me, and but I wasn't ready to do anything about it yet. Doctors in my late 20s started to tell me that I had a family history of early onset of heart disease. A couple branches away, there was a lot of diabetes, not my immediate family, but my dad had bypass surgery, first one when he was 57, and he wasn't particularly heavy. He just didn't eat the right things. But I went on a steady march. I don't think I started an attempt at dieting until I got into my early 30s. This I'm going to show you just to show you how this thing was evolving. Well, that was near the end of it. This is how I looked to New York State when they put my picture on the driver's license. It was quite photogenic. Another striking pose, because you can see I had another addiction too, but this one's been prevalent. The food's been prevalent throughout my life, and I was bound and determined to prove to you that I wasn't fat. I was never going to go above a size 38. Now, as you can see, I was starting to bust out of size 38. So, this disease has been one big lie after another that I've told myself. And as it became more and more noticeable to me, again, no one was saying anything to me. I worked in pretty much an all-male workplace, industrial workplace, but and restaurants were my hook. It was my social hook. I found I found an excellent job for being a people pleasing codependent. That was my union shop steward for the location, and what a job when you don't think you're worthy, but you have to have something. Someone like me has to have something to hook you into my life, because just Bob is Bob is not going to bring you around, and so I got this union job. People call up, this is what the company's doing to me. I said, let's meet over at Howard Johnson's and we'll talk about it. Now, when I'm sitting with friends and I know you're thinking about, my weight, I can put on quite a show in a restaurant. I know enough about nutrition. By this time, getting into my late 30s, I had a rack of diet books, probably, every diet known, some sensible, some actually, are good nutrition, others fads, but I couldn't stand any of them. But when you're around me, I could put on a show. I put the servers through their paces. Can you hold this? Substitute that. Don't put this on here. I mean, it was phenomenal. Academy Award winning stuff. But the funny part was that no one ever said anything to me. So one day I was had a friend of mine had relocated to where I was. I was in Albany, New York, and he had relocated from Ohio, where I was from originally. And he told me flat, if the first time we'd seen each other in 15 years, and he said, Bob, I admitted my alcoholism and I joined Alcoholics Anonymous. And of course, you weren't that bad. I had that problem, but I was dry, so I could no longer, I was cured of alcoholism, right? Because I've been dry for 2.5 years at that point. But there was something different about this dude. And one day we left the restaurant after one of these Academy Award winning performances. And he said to me, Bob, he said, you eat so sensibly. He says, how do you gain weight? And I was kind of speechless. It was, if anyone else had said that, I probably would have taken offense or would have had at least had a burning resentment. I probably would not have said anything. Well, I knew how it got that way, because as soon as everyone's out of sight, I'm going through the mobile mart. God knows I had my fixes. The Howard Johnson's were Dave may remember the place. I think it's gone now. It's on Route 9W, right near the thruway entrance. And it was almost like when you see Norm walk into Cheers and everyone knows Norm. Well, I was a regular enough at Howard Johnson's, and I wouldn't sit right in front of the buffet. I would sit about 3 booths down, so it didn't look like I was, and I wouldn't go up there and load up plates. I would kind of surreptitiously get a little bit, sit down, get a little bit. It was quite a show. It was quite a show, and I started. I forget when I started the diet, on and off diets. I lasted, once I actually lost some weight, and in my workplace, I got a couple of compliments. What willpower that must have taken. That's what men will compliment. At least in my, I'm not saying this is something chromosomal or anything, but in my workplace, when you exhibit willpower, that will gain you kudos, and that got me a lot of. It got me for my ego puffed up to start with, and of course we all know what happens. I eventually, for some feeble reason, or maybe not even conscious reason, I would pick up the food. I was home alone. My just anxiety, depression. I never went to a therapist. So they could probably applied half a dozen of their cycle terms to me, but Well, it brought me, and the diets, it was a remedy of the day. I'm gonna go on a diet. Lasted 9 weeks once, 9 days. I think the one I did 4 days. Uh, this particular day in 1996, I contemplated that I couldn't even start. And I sunk to a level of depression. I know that's what it was at that point that I don't think I'd ever experienced. And I started contemplating that, and it wasn't just the diet. It was just like, here I am alone and I have no friends. The food was my hook. The, the alcohol, I was exhibiting willpower because my workplace was random testing. So the alcohol wasn't viable. I think if there was a saving grace in my life, I did like my work, and I didn't want to burn that bridge. But I started contemplating that what life would be, just check out. I think what saved my butt, I should also tell you that you weren't going to get me near a church or synagogue for love nor money. I could point out the hypocrisy at 1,000 paces. I couldn't see that there were people that did good things through their religion. But I think what stopped where I stopped was I didn't become a total disbeliever. And I wasn't an agnostic or an atheist because I had this, nagging thought that there might be some being that it wasn't defined by any religion, but there might be some being out there. And if I took my life, what would await me? And almost on autopilot, I picked up the telephone and I called that guy, the recovered alcoholic that had asked me about the food a few months earlier. And I told him exactly how I felt. And it was the first time I think I'd ever laid myself bare. I mean, to talk to any human being about my feelings. And, and he was not one of us, but we talked. He told me that he'd heard ladies at his meetings. He was an active AA member. Talk about Overeaters Anonymous. And after about 4 hours on and off the phone with this poor dude, I finally went to a meeting. That brought me to the phase, probably even worse, is that now I'm sitting in rooms with people that are talking solution. The very first meeting I went to, there was 4 skinny ladies in the room. Now you think about your very first OA meeting ever, and 4 healthy body weight people sitting. I later found out 2 were bulimic, but one was clearly doing the deed. And she was describing how she worked all the different tools in the course of the meeting. And then we talked a little bit afterwards. She was steeped in this. She wasn't going to let me slink out the door. I mean, if I had known what I've since learned is you don't go to small meetings if you don't want to be confronted with the solution. You sit near the back of the room and there's 100 people in the room and you make a beeline for the door. Well, there was no easy escape. And she told me the different things she did. She was weighing and measuring her food. She was weighing and measuring her food. She had a sponsor. She was accountable to that sponsor. She committed it every day. She had identified the toxic, through her sponsor, had identified the toxic substances that were especially triggers. I will overeat on anything, but there's science behind it, but certain things are very high glycemic, sugar and flour, and so she made different suggestions. I had an excuse for them all. I'm amazing. It's amazing how creative I can be. She said, "Why don't you do this, do that, get a sponsor?" My schedule, you don't understand. The last thing she suggested was, "Why don't you go to 90 meetings in 90 days?" Well, I was ready for that because there was only maybe 2 meetings a day at most. And that's, Albany, Schenectady, Rensselaer, there was, and you don't understand my job. I'm on 24-hour call. And she said, well, you can always go to an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I think there was 200 of those. So I think if no other reason to please her, I started going. And that day, I count as my sobriety day today because it wasn't my dry day, but I count that as my sobriety day now. Believe me, I was not doing the food deed. But what happens here, it's like sitting around in the age we're in is sitting in packed rooms without a mask on. It's gonna get you. People are sharing the solution at meetings. Yeah, you're going to hear a fair amount of food logs and that, but between the rooms, they're talking a lot of solution. And I'm not quite sure. You hear it, and I was scared to ask. I'd done that one deed. I had surrendered enough to ask my friend, but I wasn't, believe me, this was more of an of an armistice I signed. This was not unconditional surrender at that point when I first came into rooms. But bit by bit, I finally got conceded to myself. I needed a sponsor. Now, who do I get as a sponsor? And I don't know if anyone else can identify, but I wasted a ton load of time interviewing people in my head for sponsor. Who is qualified to sponsor Bob? And at the end of the day, I found myself at a meeting that I didn't usually go to. And there was a guy there. And I don't know if I'd ever seen another man at a meeting in Albany. This is back in the late 90s. I may have, but we chit-chatted. He had just moved up there from Boston. We chit-chatted a little bit. Bob, do you need a sponsor? He was that direct. And I was ready. And he said, let's go somewhere, sit down, and I'll tell you what I do. And if you want what I've got, you can do what I do. And the funny part was we ended up at the Howard Johnson's down on 9W. And except this time, he'd already told me caffeine was out. So this time we sit down and I order a cup of decaf. And it was, I think the servers were, I was popular. I tip well, and what he did, he wrote down a weighed and measured food plan. I later found out that what he had presented to me was what we call 90-day format. He told me, he said, I have 2 times available, 6:15 or 6:45. I heard myself say 6:15. For the first time in many years, I had to start setting an alarm clock. I got sloppy a couple of times.
5 minutes to go, Bob.
5 minutes, okay. He told me I was rude. I had my tail tucked between my legs, and I did what the man said. That was August 29th of 1998, and that's when my current abstinence began. I was, at that point, I was about 265 pounds. Today, I weigh 155 pounds. Even the weight number is not of my choosing. I was told that I should ask my doctor what my healthy body weight was, not goal weight. Goal weight assumes that I'm taking some control back. Doctor told me at that point I should weigh 165. I was 47 years old at that point. And I started doing what he said. Now, you would think, all right, I've been to several bottoms now. I've had moments of desperation. You would think at some point in time, I'm just going to dive in and do the deed. No. He didn't talk about the steps. He was relatively new in abstinence himself. It took me another 3.5 years. I relocated to Buffalo. And again, found myself in a meeting that I didn't normally go to. And it was the same story. It was a men's group. it was in AA, and the same story. All they would talk about is solution. And I finally got up the nerve and went up and asked someone to sponsor me. And he took me through the steps, word for word, out of the big book. He threw me a highlighter and told me he stopped. He read, he did the reading. I did not do the reading. He had to start from the doctor's opinion, the forwards, and go through, because I was still not convinced that I had fully earned my seat. I mean, you can sit around rooms and hear foodalogues and drunkalogues and talk yourself right out of the place. That's what I was trying to do. I was not worthy, that maybe, I think about that today, but maybe there's some number in the body mass index that I had to cross before I'd earned my seat in OA. And, or maybe I needed to have so many DWIs, or, it's just a lot of mental masturbation I was putting myself through. And so we had to go through word for word through those first 60 some pages, through the first 4 chapters, before we got to the action. Now, I have sponsored people that you clearly sense the desperation in them, and they are ready to do business. Are you beat? Is the food have you beat? Yes. Step 1's done. Do you think just maybe there's a power greater than you that can fix this problem? And you get the same guttural grunt. Okay, you've done step 2. Will you let that power try? And if you get the head nod or whatever, then we're ready to hit step 4. This step a month club, that's called procrastination. Unless you're like me, stuck on the idea that maybe I'm not totally powerless, but not everyone comes in with that stubborn as I did. Each person is different. I do recommend that people spend time in the first 4 chapters, because, in 90-day format, after you hit your 90 days of abstinence, we're going to be putting a full court press on you to start sponsoring people. And you may get someone like me that needs to see all those examples, needs to read about Fred and the milk and the whiskey and the milk, and the needs to hear all those, which you can easily analogize.
1 minute, Bob.
Thank you. And so that's the way I've been living my life today. I've just completed another 4th and 5th step. You would think, okay, I cleaned this mess up. And finally, this time, the resentment list diminished quite a bit. The last time I realized there was a lot of people prior to recovery that I couldn't even identify a resentment, because I was so thick at the time. But today, I'm available to say yes. That's what I do. Is service and 12-step work, is it always convenient? Does it always fit into my schedule? No. I made buffets and bars fit into my schedule. I would move the planet Earth and around to get my fix. So now I get a phone call and I'm planning to run out, and I can't talk to a newcomer or someone that's suffering. BS. I'd be a selfish SOB if that was me still. So I'm grateful. Grateful. I think it's the first time I've been to this meeting, because I have another committed meeting at this time. My home group, I do have a home group. It's called Pacific Newcomers. We meet at 11 p.m. East Coast time. And I'm active. My intergroup is called a 90-day virtual intergroup. And I have a position, service position there. And we look for opportunities to carry this message, and Zoom has really opened up the world for OA. I think Zoom is going to prove to be the salvation, because there's a lot of wildernesses out there. And like I said, I'm sponsoring a guy up in Labrador now. I don't think there was OA within 500 miles of the place. Maybe I think on the mainland of Newfoundland now there's quite a bit of OA, but that's what Howard Powers had. He's got a plan. Even these last 2 years, which seemed like a downer in some ways, he's got a plan for us here in recovery, and it strengthened the program I work in. So very grateful to be here. And Matt, thank you for asking me to share, and shut up with that.
Thank you, Bob, for your share. Would you like to optionally leave your phone number if people came in late? Let us know if you're currently open to sponsoring new people.
I am. I have time slots available. I'm at area code 314-256-9574. It is a 24/7 number.